to the 35th Hayley-Roxanna Crafts quick cross stitch video, where I share information, hints and tips on one area of cross stitch in a short video. In this video, I am focusing on undoing cross stitching. When cross stitching, just like with many other crafts, it is inevitable that at some point you will have to undo your work. You may have heard crafters use the term frogging, or speak about a visit from the frog when having to do this. No one really knows where the term frogging comes from, but many cross-stitchers, embroiderers, knitters and crocheters use it. Most people believe it comes from the similarity between rip it out, which is what you have to do when you've made a mistake, and ribbit, the sound a frog makes. Common reasons for needing to undo or frog your cross stitching are miscounting, using the wrong colour of thread, or just changing your mind about a project and wanting to reuse the fabric. Like with pretty much everything in crafting, there is no one right way to frog cross stitching, but I will show you how I do it. If you catch your mistake quite quickly, so literally within your last few stitches, so for example here I've started coming back along the row but I realised I'm one stitch too short or I've got one stitch too many, then you might be able to undo this just by passing your needle back through the holes, or like reverse stitching. So just go back down where you've brought that needle up, pull it back through, and just do that for however many stitches you need to undo. You do need to make sure it's going into exactly the same place so you don't get the threads wrapped round each other, like so. But if you find that your mistakes may be a bit further back, or you've got quite a few stitches to undo, it might be easier just to unthread your needle and then use your needle to just gently lift the stitches out, like so. I always do this with my work facing me, as I find it's easier to just catch the stitch I want to undo than if I'm trying to do it on the back where the stitches are lying on top of each other. So you just put that needle under and carefully ease the thread up so you can undo it. You can also get a tool like this, just get it out, to undo them. This is a seam ripper or a thread picker. And you can use this in a similar way to you were using the needle, so you can just pop it under the stitches and pull them up. You just pop the end that hasn't got the ball on. Personally, I don't tend to use these. I prefer just to use my needle, as I find with these I worry about damaging the thread, and I like to try and reuse my thread once I've unpicked it. And I also worry about maybe damaging the fabric if I catch that, because it's a slightly sharper end than what you've got with your needle. But that's just a personal preference thing. It is a tool if you want to use it. Like I said, I just like to try and reduce the risk of damaging my threads and my fabric so that I can reuse both once I've unpicked. So what do you do if you've realised you've made a mistake further back in your work and it's somewhere where you've already secured the end of the thread? Sort of like here. Well, first of all, you need to see if you can identify where the end of the thread is. When I finish my thread, I always do it with a knot and I weave it under. So the first thing I'd need to do is look to see where I've weaved my thread under. You can just about see underneath there. And I will gently just try and pull that back out like so. Then I have to undo my knot. It is the downside to using the knots, but I just like my work nice and secure. But this is a personal preference thing, and you just have to try and gently undo that knot if you can. If you can't undo it, then you'd have to take scissors to it. I'm just going to pause and see if I can undo this knot with it a bit closer to me. So I've undone that knot. I just couldn't see to do it with the camera in between. So now I can just frog my work like I did before, just by gently pulling out the stitches with my needle, like so, just going under the leg carefully and pulling it up. I can just do that until I get to where the mistake is, so I can then correct it. If you can't identify the end of the thread, or the mistake is nowhere near an end of the thread, it might be in the middle of a section where you've done it, you could take your scissors to snip the thread. Now this does sound scary and it does terrify me every time I have to do it, because I do worry that I might accidentally catch my fabric. But if you're really careful about it, you don't. What I do with my work facing me is I just identify where it is I want to undo, sort of in the middle of the area that's wrong, really. Identify which one, and you're just going to snip the top leg of your stitch. And you just need to use a nice sharp pair of embroidery scissors to do that, and just gently snip under there. And then you can do either side of where you snipped, and you will need to undo either side so that you can re-secure the thread once you've removed the mistake. And then you can re-stitch in what you need to, or correct it in whatever way you have to. You may find after undoing your stitches there is some fluff left over. You can see quite a bit of fluff on here from where I've undone various bits when I've demonstrated stitches. Or you might find that maybe the holes of the fabric have stretched a bit. You can use a pair of tweezers, just like these, to remove little bits of fluff, like so, just gently. Or if you've got a lint roller, you could roll that over it to remove some of the fluff. Or even just take a bit of normal sort of sellotape and dab that on it to remove the fluff. As for if you've got larger holes, sometimes once you've restitched over them, that doesn't show anyway. But if the holes are in an area that's not going to be recovered, you can just sort of gently rub the fabric a little bit with your nail to sort of ease the strands of the fabric back into place to close the holes up. I also find that washing the fabric tends to readjust it so that the holes reduce in size again. But obviously you'd need to make sure that your threads and your fabric are colour fast if you're going to be washing it. A lot of the time, once you've finished the project, the holes sort of reduce themselves in size just from you handling the fabric again. Making a mistake does not make you a bad crafter. It's a normal part of the crafting process, as it's so easy to just be distracted or be having a bad brain day, or even you're just a bit tired when crafting, particularly if you've stayed up late because you've got a bit over involved in your project and wanted to get on with it. Sometimes you might not even need to undo your mistake, as you may get away with either just stitching over it in the correct colour, say, or adjusting the pattern slightly, or even just leaving the mistake as no one would notice it. But this will depend on how particular you are and whether using a workaround to undoing would bother you when the project is completed. Just remember, whatever you decide to do, don't beat yourself up over an error. And if you can feel yourself getting upset about a mistake, maybe take a break from the project and come back to it when you're feeling better and calmer. If you have any questions about frogging cross-stitching, or any tips you have found that help you deal with mistakes in your work, please pop them in the comments. In the next quick cross-stitch video, I will demonstrate loop starts.